Just to give you a little bit background of myself, I'm Greg DeShields. I have a consulting group, and we focus on 3 different areas of expertise. One is we help businesses create strategic plans and strategies, looking at issues of culture and how to make their business operate even that much more effectively. That's really what we started about a year ago, and it still is the core of the business that we have. We launched a customized project, which is around creating curriculum that is very customized to the needs of certain clients. So we're working on a client now that is integrating a program in their annual conference that will feature juniors and seniors from colleges and universities from all over the country coming to their annual conference, and they want to make it a much more valuable experience. So we developed the curriculum. It's asynchronous. It's 16 weeks. The students actually start on the 7th of July. We'll work with them until October. The conference is in November. They go to the conference. They'll have a lot more education, a lot more preparation, and should be in a much more better position to get value out of the conference itself. We did a beta test of it last year. It worked out really well, so we're excited to do it with even more conferences. And I'm sure, as many of you may think about the times that you probably went to your first conference and everyone said, go and network and meet people and just get as much as you can out of it. We tried to build real rigor and structure so that people walk away from those experiences much more educated. And then lastly, we do a great deal of presentations. This is similar to one I'll be speaking to a group of middle school students next week, and spoke at another conference in LA around diversity. But my background is in tourism and hospitality, and all of that has kind of been rolled up into what we'll be presenting to you today. And I have to say, as an entrepreneur and as a business person, discussion around artificial intelligence or whatever it is that you want to perceive it has become a very central part to how small businesses, entrepreneurs are able to compete today. And a lot of what you'll hear today, I have had the opportunity to apply it that allows for me to be even more multitask oriented and much more successful in terms of the work that I do. So, as was mentioned earlier, we make Slido available to you. We have a couple of slides that are built into today's presentation. So after being in the general session, it was pretty clear that everyone here is pretty savvy and sophisticated with it. So we're going to encourage you to participate throughout our presentation and using some form of response to Slido. Let me just start off by saying that I think the first time I heard artificial intelligence in like 2020 or 2021, I was like, I don't know what it is, and it's probably not going to be good because I'm a big Terminator fan, and I just know that all of those things that I've heard are probably going to be horrible for us. And I think more of what I encountered was a pushback. Like, I never embraced the potential. I just continued to push back. Like, something would be presented, and I would say, I can't do it, I won't do it, or I don't even want to think about it. But when you really stop to put your mind to something and use it in a way that it can help you be more efficient and help you be even that much more competitive in your business, it's amazing. And while I've done a lot of interesting things, my big aha came to me yesterday because I had to do a presentation. And I didn't like the models that I came up with, and I thought, well, why not play around with one of the chat boxes that are available to me? So I didn't use any of the typical ones. I actually went into Microsoft, into PowerPoint, and I said, can you create a PowerPoint about so-and-so? What it delivered was absolutely amazing. Was it perfect? No. But it probably saved me about 95% of the work that I would have to do. And my customization was even that much more effective because I wasn't picking colors, I wasn't picking pictures, I wasn't looking at fonts. I mean, it was all done. It was all done so incredibly perfect. And it was a big indicator to me in terms of the message from a practical perspective for you who are attending the session today, is to say that this is really good stuff. We just have to get smart about how we use it. And to that degree, we'll take you through that today. So the first thing I wanted to do was start with a question from a Slido perspective. Which single word best describes, or I should say captures, your current feeling about AI? And I've already given you some indication of what mine was and how it's changed, but I love it, cautious. I think for so many people, that idea of what is this thing going to be like? What is it going to do? I think we still have a lot of control over it. So thinking in terms of where we're at today and where we want to go is to also having a sense of where we think and what we feel. So I think untrustworthy, creepy, it could be great, and I believe 100% in that. And I believed 100% that it was very creepy until yesterday, and I said, no, it is really good stuff now. So, but the thoughts and feelings that you have are truly, I think, a good starting point when we have a conversation about this. And we'll be capturing all this information, and we'll certainly make it available to you after our presentation is done. But it's important to know where we start and how we feel, because we want to be able to move from that. And we want to embrace this because these are real feelings that we have, but we want to put those to a more practical perspective for us in terms of using it in business. All right, so what would you love to understand better about AI? And this is a question that if I had had that answer given to me before, I probably would have used it, or if I had had that question presented to me, I would use it even that much more effective. So can you give me some responses to what you would love to understand better? You know, how to better prompt, yes. That whole idea of sitting down trying to figure it out. I mean, there are some resources that give you some prompts, which is fantastic, and you can use those to build off of. Who can access it? Is it operating at its full capacity? Oh my God, this is like so fast. I didn't know it was going to be like this. Yeah. But as you can see, there are a variety of things that would help you have greater confidence, greater comfort, and greater narrow focus about how artificial intelligence can be used for you to be able to do your work and your work environments operate more efficiently. And those are the kind of things that we want to be able to deliver today. So if we are successful in providing the insight, we'll be able to provide you with some solid takeaways as you leave from this conference. So once again, we know there are things that kind of spook you out, but there are things that you want to know, and we want to be able to capture as much of that as we possibly can. So my portion of the presentation is really kind of a historical interpretation of this. And it's funny, and I consider myself to be the cocktail party guy. I'm going to give you something that you can share that will make people, when you go to a cocktail party, want to hang out with you because you know all these really cool facts. So the idea that artificial intelligence actually started like around 1943. So this was really cool. I was with my in-laws and I mentioned it. And they said, there's no way it started back in 1943. Yeah, it actually did start in 1943. And one of the things that was really important about it is this is where this idea of some sort of artificial neuron model came to be. And that was where it all started and where it had the opportunity to build as a foundation that began to create what we now see as artificial intelligence. But these neurons allowed for things to be able to talk back and forth to each other. And then in 1950, you had the Turing test. And this is where we were able to evaluate the machine's ability to exhibit some form of intelligence. And I only say this to you in this particular format because everything had to start somewhere. And this has not all of a sudden been presented to us, but has always been cultivating in the background. So a machine can actually do some form of thinking, and to that degree, we want to ultimately see that it has some form of intelligence that can be used to benefit us. And remember, the idea of all of this is to make us more efficient in what we do, and that we use it as a tool. kind of like when we moved away from rotary phones to push-button phones and wireless phones. You know, how can we take this technology and apply it in a way that makes us and the lives that we live even that much better? So we know that we began with that first sense of developing the neurons in the 1940s through the 1950s, where we got to a point where the machines were able to provide some sense of intelligence. And then the phrase in 1956 was created by John McCarthy. And I think for all of us then, as we look at how things began to evolve, there were a number of things in society that helped move the process forward. But it was in 1966 when I think the first form of some sort of artificial intelligence that created a dialogue was crowned, and that was Eliza. And it's interesting, she'd be 65 years old now, or somewhere in her 60s, and gave birth to Siri, Alexa, and then Google assistants. And understanding that historical context, that there was this continuous evolution that was happening that helped us get to where we are today. But as in the case, there's always a challenge. So there was need for funding, there was a need for research, there was a need for all of this technology to advance. But in the 1980s, we began to see some form of the, what is called the AI winter, where we had this ability to see things evolve, but there was a slowdown. And that may have been because of things like it didn't meet the expectations that people had, or there was dissatisfaction, or the research and the support that was necessary just didn't exist. So during the 70s and the 80s, the process really slowed down. And then once again, in the early 80s and the beginning of the 90s. But we finally got to a point where society said, no, we can see that things can move along better. So we had this revival that really began to take our society by storm. Some of you may remember that IBM's Deep Blue was one of the contributors to a successful chess competition that showed that artificial intelligence has a way of making a substantial contribution or impact in society. And then, of course, through the 2000s, as we began to move further in our efficiency and use of data and computing and working with algorithms, we saw that this was able to evolve at such an incredibly fast pace that things to us seemed as though that it was happening quickly, but it had been evolving all along. But having the resources and having the commitments and having the confidence in order for it to move to the next step was something that made a big difference. And for us, we began to see how fast things could evolve. So as we know, by the time we got to the 2020s and we started to see large companies like Google, as well as Microsoft, and the creation of all of these chat boxes, it just exploded. But here we are in a world where how do we take this explosion and put it into a practical sense? And that's what we'll take you through today, to give you a sense of how you take the strength and the power of all of that, something that happened in a relatively short period of time, and apply it to your business in a way that it can be more effective. So how do you do that? Well, it's maybe having the ability to take a deeper dive and understanding, number one, where I am and what holds me back and what lacks my competition. I have questions. If maybe some of my questions are answered, I can use it more efficiently. I know that there's some historical aspects to this that I'm still being educated about, but that it helped me get to a point where I could use it in a more effective way. And now maybe I can begin to unpack it in a way that, more importantly, how can I use it to be, and I think this is the most important part about how we should all look at artificial intelligence. How does this automation improve our efficiency in solving complex problems that are associated to our business? And there are aspects and there are options and there are numerous options that we have that I think will allow you to be able to leave from this session and go back to use various forms of artificial intelligence that will help you and your business even that much more effectively. So that's a bit of a historical point of view. I'm going to turn it over to Ary now, and you'll take us through maybe more the nuts and bolts of things.
So thank you, everybody, and thank you to Kristin and Greg. It's really an honor to be here with you today. So first, I'll just start off with a very brief intro background on myself. My name is Ary Aranguiz, and I am the founder of Future Ready AI Group. And I have a master's in digital education from the University of Edinburgh. And basically what that means is I know how to design learning experiences in the online world and virtually. And I'm a certified professional in talent development. I also have a postgraduate certificate from Cornell in designing and building AI solutions. And that's something that I earned recently. And I'll talk to you a little bit later on why I earned that. I have over 25 years in education. I was a former high school English teacher, then turned instructional designer, corporate trainer. I also have experience in operations and project management. And like I said, I started Future Ready AI Group because I saw the need to educate professionals, educators, small businesses to leverage and harness the power of this incredible technology that we have called AI. So that's a little bit enough about me. Just press this one. Yeah, there we go. Oh, I'm going backward. All right, so I have a question for you. We're going to start with a question. I would love to know, or all of us here would love to know, what skills will matter most as AI reshapes work? What do you think are the skills that are going to matter most as AI reshapes work? And we left it open-ended rather than give you multiple choice because we want to hear from you. Digital literacy, absolutely. Analyzing the results, coding, effective communication, critical thinking, humanistic approach, critical thinking and creativity, communication, research, integrity. Absolutely, yep. We're going to talk about all of those. Awesome. Empathetic ability, training. Yep. I'll go ahead and move on to the next slide just in the interest of time, but keep typing those answers in because we're going to come back to this. We're going to come back to this slide. So we're going to start with a quote. In times of change, learners inherit the earth, while the learned find themselves beautifully equipped to deal with a world that no longer exists. And that's a quote from Eric Hoffer, an American philosopher. So I'm going to take you back for a second to a world that no longer exists, specifically the 1980s, the late 80s. So in the late 80s, my father, who was a Cuban immigrant, he was an accountant, and he spoke English as a second language. And at his business, at his company, he heard that they were going to bring in computers. And he was very worried and panicked because he had been doing accounting for over, 20, 30 years. And then all of a sudden, now this new technology comes in, and he's going to have to go from the manual number crunching that he did to using this technology, the personal computer. So what he did is he had a very much a growth mindset. He knew that he needed to learn, unlearn, relearn. And so he signed up for a correspondence course. So every week, I think every week or every month, I was a kid, I kind of remember, but he would get these modules, these learning modules. They would come in these big envelopes. And he would get these activities that he would have to do with a personal computer that we had recently bought at the weirdest place. It was actually a department store where we had bought our first computer. And so basically he would do the activities, he would send it back, and to make a long story, I don't want to dwell on the story, but within 6 months he became an expert in the personal computer. And the moral of the story is that he stayed at his company for over 35 years. So he evolved, he knew that he needed to adapt, he knew that he needed to learn, relearn, unlearn, or else he would become obsolete. Okay, not obsolete in the good way, as we heard this morning at the keynote speaker. That was becoming obsolete in a good way because you're still reinventing and you're mentoring and you're helping people. This was becoming obsolete where that's it. You no longer have a job because you don't have the skills or the competencies that are needed for this new workforce, new workplace. So by 2030, 500 million to 1 billion of us will need to adapt to AI in our daily work. And our keynote speaker mentioned a statistic about this as well. So what does that mean? How do we start preparing? Many of you in the first question that we posed to you, you shared the skills. You already know the skills that you need. Somebody wrote critical thinking. Critical thinking is critical, especially for our younger generations, making sure that our education system prepares our students. Unfortunately, I was a teacher, and I can say we haven't done a good job in preparing our students for critical thinking, making sure that they can analyze, making sure that they can problem solve and synthesize information. We need to do better. We also need to do better at teaching ourselves and teaching our students to be more metacognitive. And what does that mean to be metacognitive? It basically means to think about our thinking. When we are interacting with AI, when we're using ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, when we approach it, we need to think about what we want. What is our end goal? Who is our audience? What format do we want? There's a series of questions that we need to ask ourselves. I've provided you with a handout on the back. On the front, it tells you about different types of LLMs, but on the back, I've given you a series of metacognitive questions to ask yourself when you prompt, before you start prompting, while you're prompting, when you get the result, to analyze and question, and then after you get the output, after you get the result, keep asking those questions. So your questioning skills are key. Another very important thing why metacognition in your critical thinking is so key is because the output may not always be accurate. It may be biased, it may be incorrect, and although over the last 6 months, you can now get a source, so you can ask the LLM to cite a source to verify, and then you could click on that link and verify. You still want to keep doing that because maybe that source that it cited for you is also incorrect. And it also may be misinformation or disinformation or biased or whatever. So that's where critical thinking and metacognition are so important. Emotional intelligence. We heard it today. The keynote speaker was amazing in inspiring us and talking about being hopeful and inspiring others to be hopeful through empathy, through caring, through belief in yourself and belief in others. That is also so important in this day and age. If anything, AI can make us more human because what we can do, we can automate AI to send that email, but we are the only ones who can build that relationship with that person that we emailed. So always remember that, keeping that human connection. Collaboration and digital communication. Many of you in your responses shared that as well. We are going to need to know how to communicate not only better with each other, but also with the AI. And this might be the first time you hear it or you've heard it before. We are going to have AI as our managers. We are also going to be managing AI, and how do we communicate that? And then there are jobs that are going to come as a result of that. So there is a lot of hope, and I'll share that in just a second. I'm leaving the best part, the hopeful part, for the end. No matter what, our communication skills, we need to hone that so that we know how to communicate with both machines and with our fellow human beings. Agility and adaptability. I shared that story at the beginning about my dad. He was adaptable in that sense because it was survival. Either he did it or that's it, he would lose his job. So keeping that open mind, learning fast and unlearning faster. Always keeping that in mind. And the pivoting part is so important. I am a Gen Xer, and I am already, this is my third pivot. I was a teacher, then a corporate trainer, and now I am an entrepreneur. So I am on my third, and I'll keep going for as long as I can. And finally, ethics and bias. All of these chatbots are trained on all human knowledge that has ever been digitized, okay? We human beings, there's so much beauty in everything that we create, but there's also ugliness. And the keynote speaker also mentioned that as well, the darkness of organizations, right? So as we are interacting with the outputs, checking for bias, especially in your companies, making sure that there's representation, that all groups are included, that there aren't groups that are excluded, and also being aware that these machines, this technology is also creating another group of individuals that are exploited or oppressed, and learning about that so that we could do something about that as well. So I know it's a lot, but there's hope. So Matt Bean, the author of the Skill Code, says that today's problems demand that we do better to create work that takes full advantage of AI's amazing capabilities while enhancing our skills as we do it. One of the things that three concepts that he says that we cannot lose sight of is our connection, which is our ability to work with each other, complexity, that we cannot outsource everything to AI. Yes, we can ask it to build a presentation for us, but that's where we're still using our critical thinking, our own metacognition and critical thinking, so that we are always challenged. Our brains still need to be challenged. And the final one is challenge. So connection, complexity, and challenge, that we're seeking opportunities for personal growth, for professional growth, for spiritual growth. It's an excellent book. I highly, highly recommend it. So 10% of today's job titles did not exist in the year 2000. So think about that. So imagine in the year 2030, 2045, many of the jobs that we have today, job titles, they are going to evolve. So what if we could use AI to help us prepare for that future? And if today someone is an accountant, as the technology evolves, that job is going to require a different set of skills, and it's going to be a different job title. It may not be accountant anymore. It might be an AI-augmented financial analyst. And what are the skills? It's going to be a whole different set of skills. So what I've done here is, this is a tool, and Greg is going to help me out here. We're going to get some audience participation. This is a tool called Party Rock AWS. It's an Amazon product. It is absolutely free. I highly recommend that you try it and experiment with it. And I spoke with Nicholas this morning about it, and I demoed it for him. And basically, you could build any app for anything you want to build an app for, and it's 100% free. So I built an app where you could put in a job title, and that AI, that chatbot, will give you another job title, the job title of the future, along with a description of the types of skills that you will need in the future, a job description, the types of AI agents you're going to be working with, the types of people you're going to be working with, and an analysis of how to evolve and resources that you can now start using to prepare yourself for that AI, the AI job as a future, as your job evolves. So we're going to try it. So I'd like anyone who would like to volunteer and give me a job title, and we'll do it live. And so, like I said, we would love to answer any questions that you have. So I will turn it over to Kristin.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kristin. I have a master's degree in computer science. I'm a civil servant I'm also an entrepreneur, and I'd like to share with you a couple of key points about what I think is important about artificial intelligence. First, we're using that term wrong. As a whole, across society, we're using this term very casually. We do not have artificial intelligence, we have machine learning. Artificial intelligence is this theoretical concept that we're striving towards. You could kind of think of it like perfection. That's not what we're dealing with. What we have today is machine learning. I'll use these terms interchangeably as we use this term in society all the time very casually, but I just want to be clear. We don't actually have an intelligent system. We have a machine that has become so advanced and so efficient that it's actually beyond our understanding at this point. All right, so that's my little disclaimer. From here on out, I'm going to keep using the term artificial intelligence, but I want you. And what we can do with that is really, even the number of possibilities I can't really comprehend. So collectively, as a society, we're figuring this out today. So I just want to go over a couple of things such as the laws and the ethics. This is something that I hear questions about a lot, and unfortunately, there isn't an answer, not a good one anyway. There's a huge disconnect between what's happening federally and at the state level. They're impacting different aspects of how we use AI. They're affecting different industries. They're all over the map. And they're at different levels of maturity. So depending on the state you're in, depending on whether you're looking at state or federal law, basically the point is you cannot depend on the legal system to protect you. You need to be in the rooms like this, having these conversations and educating yourself. I hear a lot also that people are afraid they're going to lose their job. That only happens if you are afraid to learn, or you might hear this a lot lately, to unlearn, relearn, and unlearn is the way that we're heading in the future, is to be adaptive in your knowledge and to not be afraid to, and I like to use the word play, right? So before we talk about what I mean by that, one rule of thumb that I want you to know is when in doubt, keep it out. So if you wouldn't tell me a piece of information, don't tell ChatGPT. So like your social security number, I hope you all know, don't tell me your social security number. Don't tell anyone your social security number, especially not ChatGPT. Just a little more background information about that. There are, I'm sure, millions of engineers all over the world working to develop systems like ChatGPT. There's no central body governing them. There's nobody sitting around going, let's eliminate that job and create this one. This is a collective experience, a collective evolution of how we use technology in our society. So in that way, it can be exciting. And I acknowledge you all for being here because you're empowering yourself to evolve your job rather than waiting for someone to evolve it for you and to make yourself obsolete, like we were talking about this morning, but this in a more negative way. Right, so you're here taking the steps to avoid that. Right, so I'd like to, while we're talking, ask you to be an active participant. We have 2 worksheets for you. I'm going to introduce you to one of them, and I'm going to ask Ary to introduce you to the other one, and then we'll walk through it as a team, all of us. So just start to get familiar with this. This is about you. This is about your story and how you use AI. It's very business-oriented, but it doesn't have to be. You could think about this for a personal project, for your own research, or just for fun. But since we're at a workforce development conference, this is very business-oriented. So first, I actually want to start with number 2, know what not to share. So social security numbers are obvious. Your address, for example, like I said, think about what you would tell me. You might maybe feel comfortable telling me where you live, but there's still a little doubt there, so don't tell ChatGPT. Phone number, kind of a little sketchy, probably. Don't tell ChatGPT. Your name, not a big deal. Your name's publicly available on the internet. There are a lot of good examples that we'll talk about for what you can share. Also, like if you work in the medical field, any kind of health information, diagnosed medical issues, anything like that, don't put it in there because, like I said, there are teams of engineers all over the world that are working on this, and there's no legal protection around what they can do with that, not yet anyway. So they definitely, there's a lot of different pockets of this happening. There's a lot of different businesses popping up around the world that are doing this type of work. And so they will definitely, well, not in 100% of cases, but it's a smart business move for them to store your data. And then they use AI to analyze your data and draw analysis and conclusion from that.
Hey, Kristin and Ary, I had a question for you, and this is maybe from the practical side of it, just to maybe get some clarity. So if I'm using ChatGPT for, a question I need to get an answer to, and it does give me a great answer, and maybe I didn't put a social security number or anything like that, but maybe I put in there that I'm seeking to do a contract with blah, blah, blah. So does that stay in the memory, which then can be curated in perhaps ChatGPT that appears when you do a Google search? So should I, as a person who's doing that, go in and erase that information because maybe I don't want that question to pop up anywhere else? So I just wanted to ask you, if I'm putting stuff in, not just confidential information, but just certain questions, should I go in and delete that question from my searching in ChatGPT to protect it from getting out there? And then the other part of it is, can you also talk about the difference between having a paid account and a free account?
Yeah, absolutely. Those are both great questions. So without being on the engineering team, I can only speculate about this, but as a computer scientist, what I would tell you is just because you delete it from your profile doesn't mean it's gone. They most likely, I would expect that they are retaining as much data as they can to train their systems and to develop their products. I wouldn't have any expectation that there's any security or privacy around anything that you put in there. But it's extremely unlikely that a human is looking at your data. It's almost certainly, they're just having their own machine systems analyze your data for trends, for things that they could turn into a new product, for some kind of anomaly that they might be able to use in some way. Yeah. So it's like something that's just a little embarrassing. If you're asking ChatGPT about some health issue, like that's anonymous, and it's just slightly embarrassing. That's nobody's going to look at that. But if you have a diagnosed medical condition and you identify yourself that way, that information is almost certainly staying in a system somewhere.
Yeah, I'd like to add also, so on both the free, not the free, but on the paid account, you can disable the memory so that any chat that you have is not being used to train the model. However, even if you disable it, as Kristin said, or rather, even whether you disable it and say, I don't want any of my chats to be used to train the model, because they have already not outright admitted that they used all of the data that human beings have created and has been digitized. We know that they have without permission. There are lawsuits. So even if we disable that button, we don't really know what they're doing with our data. So as Kristin has said, if you don't want anyone to know about it, it's confidential, private, don't enter it. Redact it in some way, adapt your information in some way so that it's like asking for a friend, or and you don't use particular names, especially if it's something that you're creating that it's very confidential and you don't want anyone to know about it yet.
And then regarding the free version versus the plus version, but also one other thing I want to add on to that is that I would not want to train myself on a certain model of machine learning, like being like, oh, it's okay to use ChatGPT in this way, but then you become accustomed to using all AI systems in that way, and so I think it's just better not to. But so with ChatGPT, specifically from OpenAI at this point, although this changes every year, they give you a certain amount of processing power and they give you access to their more advanced algorithm. So they have new versions every year, kind of like your cell phone. You get the upgraded cell phone every year. They're doing the same thing. They're developing ChatGPT every year, coming up with new, better models, and then they release that over time, and they can charge you more for that, as well as limiting the amount of content that you can withdraw from it. And please stop me if you have any other questions. Yeah, this is meant to be about you. This is meant to be interactive. So please take notes as we go, especially, so that was question number 2. This is industry specific. So if there's anything that was relevant to you, please take notes about that. And now let's talk about what are good reasons to use ChatGPT or other similar types of models. One really great example that came up earlier, and besides starting an email, besides writing a subject line, things like that, would be like if you're developing for an RFP, a request for proposals, you get this long document that outlines all of these specifications. Now you can feed that whole thing into ChatGPT and ask it to outline a response for you. Now this, if you've never seen an RFP or a grant proposal, these are extremely lengthy, time-consuming documents. So that in itself reduces many, many hours of work. And this is the kind of thing that we're talking about when we say we're afraid that people are going to lose their job. Grant research and grant writing are huge industries with a huge demand for people. That, there aren't enough people to fill these jobs. With ChatGPT, this is definitely one area that I think will change dramatically, is changing dramatically. And this is the type of work that ChatGPT is good at. Because you're not putting anything of yours in there. You're taking something publicly available or available in a database, depending on where you get your RFPs from. You take their document with nothing sensitive in it. You give that to ChatGPT, and it gives you the outline. And then you take that and you modify it for your needs. Does anybody have any other examples of how they use ChatGPT in their life that they wouldn't mind sharing? Yeah.
Sometimes I have ChatGPT edit my writing, and you can just give it the prompts to say you're writing a paper or something like that. But I also find that it's better if I take something I wrote myself and have it take my voice and expand or edit, basically proofread for me and expand. But should there be a concern there that if you're giving a large language model your voice, it certainly doesn't have one.
You mean your actual audio?
No.
Your writing style.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be concerned about that because it draws from all of the information on the internet. So as long as you're not putting something sensitive on there, yeah.
I'd like to add to that. So one of the things that I do is I work with small businesses, with entrepreneurs, to help them build custom GPTs, and we can get into what the difference is in a second, but to actually build those custom GPTs so it does speak like you. So it does have your voice, your tone of your tone, if it's witty, if it's professional, or whatever it is, your style of writing. So that is a good thing. That's not a bad thing. But in the case of, let's say, K-12 students or higher education students, I love what you said, that you write it first and then you use it as a tool to coach you as an editor, right? That's what we need to be doing with our younger generations, because what's happening is if students just go to ChatGPT and they don't go through that struggle of the writing process, then our critical thinking skills are going to really decline, and that's not good for society. So there are a lot of different thought leaders that talk about that, the importance of not losing, of delegating and outsourcing all of our thinking, where we're so dependent that we no longer, there's cognitive decline. There are actual studies, and more studies are taking place showing that with younger people, we've already, all of us have gone through school. We know what it's like to go through that struggle of learning and writing, but younger kids in K through 12 and even freshmen, they haven't developed those cognitive skills yet.
I just wanted to say from my perspective, it's, when you're working with a limited amount of staff and you're trying to compete, one of the things that was most impressive for me was to be able to get a proposal done.
Yeah.
And a complete proposal that was itemized in terms of the average cost of something, so that I could get back to a client. You know, as an entrepreneur, you get someone who says, like, I just had someone today who said, I need a proposal by the end of today. And I'm like, okay, I have to do it in the car on the way back. But it is very efficient in terms of landing you on earth, and having been in business and know the process that it could take working through finance and marketing and the legal. It makes it very difficult to be very timely in getting back in a very competitive environment. So to that degree, it worked out extremely well. It made me very efficient in terms of how I could structure a negotiation with a sense of what the average price is, you know, and I had a sense of what's real and what's not real. We also are talking about ChatGPT and some of the chat boxes, but I produce a podcast, and there's a tool that we use called Riverside. I don't know if you've ever heard of Riverside, but Riverside helps to, and it was just interesting because you were talking about the tone of your voice. Literally, it does create the tone of your voice. So as you would imagine with a lot of podcasts, I produce one. We have to do an intro, so we have to develop a script, and then we have to read it. And to read that, normally it's outside of the actual interview that you would do with someone, and you'd want it to be perfect. So you might do 5 and 6 takes of that before it was flawless. But Riverside allows you to read your script, errors and all, and then you upload the script, and then it will take the tone of your voice and it'll read the script flawlessly, which is an amazing way for an entrepreneur to do their podcasts. And they've actually gotten to the point now where you can have avatars who look like you, who it doesn't even have to be you who is actually reading it. So it is evolving in some of these other areas, and that is something that's just been very amazing. But it helps tremendously, once again, when you have limited resources and you're still trying to compete and you're trying to produce.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions before we keep moving on?
It's exciting, scary, it's inevitable.
Yeah. So
There's really no way to tell if somebody's scamming you with like what you just discussed.
Well, I mean, there is, I don't want to be too scary, but yeah, there is a new threat out there where they are, like on Zoom calls, you'll see like they can impersonate you to a degree that's really convincing and alarming. And you know, even in the past, just with emails, just with the phishing and the emails, that we were already getting to this point where we were seeing companies develop policies where you can only make requests in person. No phone calls, no emails, don't send attachments. These things are becoming more common, and now it's looking like even video calls are going to be off limits in a lot of sensitive cases. So we're going to, oddly enough, I think over the next year, couple of years, maybe even sooner, we'll see we'll be reverting back to more in-person interaction, more in-person transactions, and not utilizing technology as much as we had.
Another thing I was wondering about, you said before you can put your name in there because your name's all over the place, right? But I'm wondering, can you use that to your advantage and make yourself really glorious out there? Because when you ask about somebody, it goes in searches everywhere. Does it take your information also, like you were saying, that that the memory could get erased, but it's still out there. So eventually, with everybody putting all this crap out there, what's like 10 years from now going to look like? That information's not going to be as valuable, right?
Yeah, so I see your hand. We'll come over there in just a second. So in the world of cybersecurity, you can never say things are 100% secure. Just keep that in mind. But in theory, especially with a company like ChatGPT, or OpenAI is the company that develops ChatGPT, they have a wall between users. So I should never be able to see anything or access anything that anyone else does, not in this room or anywhere around the world. But that's not to say that they can't be hacked into. Especially like you said, 10 years down the road, you know, we're seeing hospitals and governments and utility companies being hacked all the time. You know, I just was impacted by a T-Mobile data leak. And so you can never say never, but there are guardrails in place, especially with a large company like that wants to protect its reputation and protect the industry's reputation. They don't want to force the government to move faster to regulate them. They like the state that they're in right now, where there aren't any mature laws governing what they're doing. And so they have an incentive to keep some guardrails in place like that. So in theory, like I said, but never say never, what you have entered in there, just the bare minimum, your name, things like that, their developers could access it,
Yeah.
but not any other user, not anyone in this room or otherwise. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah, you had your hand up back there?
Yeah, I have another two-part question. One kind of this came up after, but don't we already have certain data privacy laws in place, and wouldn't these companies be subject to them? Like when you're saying that, like we don't really know, and it's not really regulated, like isn't that like a general concern? Like even before AI, we think about social media, we think about all kinds of like online forums. The idea of people's information being regulated to be protected and not sold.
To some degree.
Concern that get protection. I'm pretty sure our information is being protected. I'm pretty sure they're selling it any chance they can get to anyone who want to buy it. So it's really like more like, I think that's more of a regulatory issue because privacy, like you said, doesn't really exist. So it's a question of like, what can people do with your privacy?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a great question with all those
Yeah.
VPNs and data watch and identity theft insurance and all those things. That's a really good point. And there are some cases where there are laws, like HIPAA is a really good example of a strong law that does protect us. But a lot of existing laws, while they're more regulatory and they don't have a penalty attached to them, so we're still in a gray area right now in a lot of ways. But you are right, yeah, there are some cases where there are some protections in law, but we're still not at a place where I feel comfortable.
Yeah.
What tools exist to determine if something was created in AI? Is there a way to determine that?
That's a lot of those tools I think are in development. I know that LinkedIn recently, if you add an image to a post in LinkedIn and that image was generated with AI, with ChatGPT or any other LLM, it will have like a little symbol at the top. And I just noticed it the other day. So a lot of companies are trying to have like some kind of digital watermark so that then it'll show that that is an original, it's not digitally created, or to have some kind of mark that shows that it was some kind of note or indicator that it was generated by AI. I don't know if either of you have any other.
I mean, I've noticed that now, even when you are requesting content that you get and there are citations that come from ChatGPT, it says it in the citation. So even if you are assuming that you can present this as your original content, even if you're editing it, the citations show where it came from.
And
So-
that's relatively new. I've noticed that too. That's the things are changing to improve and demonstrate the transparency of this was generated by AI, not by a person. Another thing which a lot of people don't do, but we should do, is if we post something, we could at the end of our post say this was co-created with AI or this was co-authored with AI. So that's something that should become a best practice, because a lot of our content eventually will become mostly AI generated, and they call that AI slop. So that it's just like this regurgitation of it's this cloning of clone. It's like all that content is becoming AI generated, and then we just have this massive AI generated stuff and no originality and same. And it all sounds the same. So that's something else to always consider. I wanted to go back to the question that you had about data privacy. A use case for that, and I mean, I don't always do it, but if you are concerned about a particular site, you can find the terms of service and just download the terms of service and their privacy policy as a PDF. Go into ChatGPT or Gemini or any LLM, upload that PDF, and then ask, what are the red flags here? What are the how is my data being protected? And it will give you, unfortunately though, there's also a website, I can't remember off the top of my head, where you can type in the name of the company, like for example, LinkedIn, Instagram or whatever, and it'll tell you how your data is used, whether it's private or not, and there's a lot of red flags. So that means we wouldn't use any of it. We would, but that's one way that we can inform ourselves.
One other thought, and I don't know, maybe the two of you might want to share some industry perspective on it, but Grammarly gives you an AI analysis of a document as well. So it's kind of going in and out of content that you might get with one and run through another. And then, in the world of higher ed, there were, and I'm trying to remember, there were, a few different tools academically that they use to try and combat that. Although a lot of professors can just tell because they know their students don't write that way. But I mean, in general, there are a few sources outside of the chat boxes that you still engage with that can give you some intel about that as well.
But then also there have been students, so 'cause there's always good and bad, right? There have been students who have been accused of plagiarism because of those tools, and they've said, they've actually gone to court and said, no, I haven't plagiarized. And, how do you prove it? It's very difficult. So.
Yeah.
I had a follow-up question. I was wondering, it's like you guys don't know, but I know that financial crimes have already been like a big issue even before AI, inside of like the amount of money lost every year to that like I'm sure trickles down to like house services costs and things like that for people, but I know that that's a burden in the financial industry. I'm wondering, like, when you were talking about going back to more in-person interactions because of like Zoom, AI, and things like that, like, what is the impact of AI on the financial industry? Like, has there been a conversation about that? Like, when we're talking about information you should or shouldn't give to AI, and we've had people, right, farming to do those things. I can't even imagine what they're doing now with AI. Like, I can't.
The big use that I'm concerned about is with ransomware. You've probably heard in the news, hospitals and schools, especially right now, are getting hit pretty hard with ransomware, and that's one of the major unethical uses of AI. It's very good at it, and it does impact us, not just in the financial industry. New York paid $750 million due to cybercrime in 2023. And I assume most of us live here and pay taxes here. And so that is a burden that we're all sharing.
And to my understanding, most of the time when it comes to like cyber financial crime, these losses are not removed. Like, it's just growing every year. And honestly, what's the other side of that from when I looked at data a couple years ago, the amount that they're spending to combat it is also like ludicrous and sometimes can amount to even more than they're even taking.
We're going to have a follow-up session to go in depth about that. Yeah, we're going to talk about that later.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is a really great conversation that I think deserves a lot of time to go in depth on it. And we will have additional conversations about that. I haven't been watching the time. How are we doing on time? Okay, so let's hold on to that for now. I do want to ask you to start looking at the second or the third page of this sheet, because I want you to see the framing of the prompts here. I might use the word external. They're framed externally. They're not about you. They're like, for example, it's about your service. The first one is our main service is blank. What additional revenue streams could we consider? I'm thinking about opening a business in blank. What sort of products might we want to sell? So you don't give it anything personal to you, but you can still get the personal answers you're looking for without exposing yourself to any privacy concerns. And then one other thing I want to just point out on here, that about having some sort of an AI policy, if you don't already, or if you do have one, to consider where the gaps might be. Something I hear a lot from people, that they don't want to hear anything that I have to say about AI. I'm not using AI, it's evil.
Yeah.
But to that I would say that's totally fine that you're not going to use it, but everyone around you is using it. So you may be sending emails to someone and including personal information, and they might just copy and paste that into ChatGPT and be like, hey, respond to this email for me. Or you may have employees that, unknowingly are like, all right, I'm going to put all this billing information into ChatGPT so I don't have to do the analysis. And so, just to start thinking about these sorts of things, get ahead of the game as much as possible.
Thank you, Kristin. So the handout that I gave you on the front, you have a list of all the different LLMs and the different uses. Does anyone have any questions about that? Those are the 5 most common ones. There are others. There's actually a site where you can, it's called the LLM leaderboard, and you can Google that and it'll take you to that site, and you can, in real time, you can put in a prompt and pick the model that you want and compare the responses. So if you wanted to compare which one is better at giving me a response for this particular prompt, and then that way you could pick the model that gave you the best response for that particular prompt or that particular task that you wanted to accomplish. So on the back, what I did is I gave you a set of questions, just as like guiding questions to think about when you're prompting. Before you start prompting, think about, what is your end goal? What is the type of output? I'll go over this in just a second. What is your end goal? What do you want the output to be? There are questions that you should be asking yourself, thinking about your thinking before you prompt. While you're prompting, sometimes the output's not going to be perfect. It's getting better, but most of the time you have to have a conversation and you have to tweak it. And it's just like I equate it to, you have someone who might be new in your company, or someone who doesn't have the same level of experience on that subject, and you're coaching them and you're training them. Even like a child, you're teaching them. And you have to have that back and forth conversation. So these are questions that you can ask yourself, did I not mention the format, or do I want you to now give this output to me in a PowerPoint format? Because it can actually give you a PowerPoint. It can actually give you a CSV file. It can actually give you Google Slides. So you can ask it for the format that you want, in table form, in columns, whatever it is. And then finally, the third set of questions is, again, aligning with your team. Is the output something that works for us, for our team? Just constantly be questioning the responses and asking yourself, did I learn from this experience? And if you have young people in your life, making sure that those young people get a chance to not outsource all their thinking, but that they go through that struggle of the thinking process, of the learning process, the writing process, because that's how we stay creative and sharp and thrive in the world. So any questions about anything involving? So.
All right, if you have any questions, happy to stick around and answer them, or you can definitely contact us. Otherwise, please join us in room 1.